Hello, everyone. Welcome to GAAPP Academy, our first of 2023. Today, we will be talking about demystifying clinical trials. Before we get started today, I just wanted to go over a few items. Today's event is brought to you in two languages. We will be in the main audio will be in English. If you would like to hear our presentation today in Spanish, Spanish interpretation is available. If you go down to the bottom of your screen, there is an icon for interpretation. Select Spanish and enter the Spanish room accordingly. If you'd like to select your language now, we'll continue. Before we get started, I also want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Without their support, we would not be able to present this to you today. We're excited to start GAAPP Academy for 2023 again. We will be talking about clinical trials today, and we will have monthly sessions geared toward topics that will help you better run your patient advocacy groups. If there's anyone in your organization or colleagues that weren't able to attend today, we will have the session recorded and posted in our YouTube videos and on our website so that you can share with your community as well. Throughout the session, please feel free to use the chat if you have any technical difficulties, and also to submit questions and answers, questions for the Q&A at the end so that we can address your questions. But please feel free to submit throughout. I don't think I've been able to introduce myself. I am Lindsay DeSantis, and I am the Executive Director for GAAPP, and I'm so glad that you're able to join us today. Our speaker today joins us from IQVIA. IQVIA, it creates intelligent connections across all aspects of healthcare through its analytics, transformative technologies, big data resources, and extensive domain expertise. It brings together machine learning, predictive analysis, and the right expertise needed to answer challenging questions and uncover new insights. Katy Canales Padilla is a clinical trial educator at IQVIA. She is based out of the US and received her bachelor's degree from Stony Brook University and her master's from the University of Buffalo. I'm excited to welcome Katy today and dive deeper into clinical trials. Katy?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today in going over a brief overview of clinical trials. We are going to touch upon the very top layer of clinical research. So if you have any questions that come up along the way, please don't hesitate to ask me towards the end. I'm very excited to speak with you all. So I am going to begin now. Okay. So this is a presentation just to speak about clinical trials, what clinical trial is, clinical research is, and how you can get involved in this. So we will leave questions for the end. Alrighty, so what is medical research? So clinical research aims to advance medical knowledge by studying people either through direct interaction or through the collection and analysis of blood tissues and other samples. A clinical trial involves research participants that follows a predefined plan, or as it is also known, a protocol to evaluate the effects of a medical or behavioral intervention on health outcomes. So any new medication or medical device that must first be tested in medical research, in human medical research, also known as clinical trials, before it can be prescribed to patients. So the main goal is to learn if a potential new medication is safe and to assess how well it works. If the medication succeeds in a clinical trial, pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies submit the results to regulatory agencies to seek approval for the medication to be prescribed to patients. So there are 4 phases of a clinical trial. In phase 1, healthy people, about 20 to 30, are selected and the drug is administered to them to check the working and possible side effects that the drug might have on patients. Then on phase 2, we have around 100 to 300 people are used in this particular phase to work more on the effectiveness of the drug. So the aim in this phase 2 is to obtain the data whether the drug is effective in diagnosing certain conditions in people or not. It continues working on safety even in this phase, but is mostly restricted to checking out the side effects and the drug the side effects, that the drug might have on the patient. Then once the phase 2 of the clinical trial is completed, we move on to phase 3. So the number of subjects is usually between 1,000 to 3,000 in this phase. It continues studying the safety and the effectiveness of the drug, but this time with different populations and dosages. So if the drug is approved by the concerned authorities or organizations such as the FDA, after seeing the positive trial results, it proceeds to the final phase, which is known as phase 4. In phase 4, after getting approval from the FDA, the drug is checked on the diverse populations for safety and effectiveness. So a big question that patients typically have are clinical trials safe? So researchers must follow very strict rules to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone taking part in a clinical trial. So clinical trials are carefully monitored by various regulatory agencies such as the FDA, the EMA, and other ministries of health or regulatory authorities in countries all around the world. So these government agencies are responsible for the rules and regulations of the conduct of clinical trials. The institutional review boards, for example, and ethics committees are responsible for reviewing proposed and ongoing clinical trials to make sure there are appropriate steps in place to protect the rights and the welfare of patients. So they are made up of scientists, doctors, other experts, as well as members in the community in order to protect the patient's rights. So another question that patients typically have is, what is it like to take part of a clinical trial? So the first step is finding out all about the clinical trial before deciding you want to take part of it. So making that decision whether you want to be a part of clinical research and to move forward with new innovations that are currently taking place. So this process is also called the informed consent. So once you decide to take part of the clinical trial, you move on to get informed consent. So if you agree, researchers will see if you're eligible to participate during the process called screening. And this may involve many medical tests and assessments to provide whether you are eligible or not. So different trials have different requirements. So this can look different for all the different trials that are out there. In randomized clinical trials, you will be assigned at random, meaning you cannot choose and you will not know where you will be assigned to receive either the investigational product or a standard medication or a placebo. A placebo looks very much like the investigational product, but it contains no active medicine. Including a placebo in certain trials is very important to provide more certainty that any effect seen in the investigational product is definitely attributable to the product. So it's very important to be a part of either the placebo or the investigational product. So once you're randomized, you're taking part of the clinical trial, the study comes to an end where the data is collected and analyzed and taken to the FDA to be approved. So after, as a participant, you should be provided the information, of course, before the study starts about how long it will last, whether you will continue receiving treatment after the trial ends, if applicable, so every study looks different, and how you will be kept informed about the results of the study. So just be sure to ask your provider very specific questions. Another big question that patients typically have are, what are the risks of clinical trials? So the side effects of an investigational product are not always known. So it's very, very important for you to ask questions to your medical research team. So researchers must tell you about any known risks and also discuss the potential for unknown risks before you decide to take part of a clinical trial. Most side effects are minor and merely unpleasant. However, sometimes side effects can be serious or even life-threatening. The risk may vary depending on the product being tested. So therefore, it's very, very important for you to adhere to the protocols, ask any questions along the way, and be very honest with your provider about what you are experiencing. So clinical trial participants can stop taking part in a trial at any time for any given reason. So this is called withdrawing consent. So if there are any, if you're concerned with any risks, you can speak with your provider and, take stop participation at any time. So as a trial participant, how are you protected? So researchers are required to provide you with complete information about the trial. This process, as I mentioned before, is called the informed consent. So you should not agree to participate in any trial unless you understand all the details of the informed consent, also known as the ICF. You can ask questions if you're not sure about anything. So if you have any specific questions, this is the time to ask before enrolling. And as I mentioned before, you are able to withdraw consent at any time if you feel that you are at risk or if you do not wish to participate any further. So a big question as well is, why should you take part in a clinical trial? So some participants, or some people rather, participate in clinical trials to contribute to medical research and to help doctors to find new ways to help patients. Others might just take part in hope to receive an investigational medication or a new device or procedures because their condition is not responding to a standard treatment. However, there's no guarantee that an investigational product will work. As I mentioned before, there are benefits and risks that you have to discuss with your provider. It is also important that all kinds of people are represented in clinical trials to make sure that the drug is working to its full potential. It should be assessed within a variety or a diverse group of a diverse population. This is because certain conditions and medications may affect people differently based on their age, their sex, their race, ethnicity, and their genes. So it's important to participate if given the chance. Without clinical trials, improvements to current treatments and medical technologies would not be possible. So what are some questions that you should ask before deciding to take part of a clinical trial? Some questions that might come up are, what kinds of tests and assessments will I have to take? What are my treatment choices? How often will I have to visit the researcher or the clinic? This one is very important because it is very critical to adhere to the protocol schedule. So if you know you're going to be taking 30 vacations in 1 year and you will not be in place to be going into the clinic, definitely bring that up to your provider so you can start treatment at the right time. Will I have to stay in the hospital overnight? And of course, what are the side effects of the investigational product? After the trial ends, it's very important to also ask questions, such as, will you follow up on my health after the end of the study? Will you tell me the results of the study? And who do I call if I have more questions? So how can you find out more? There are different websites that you can visit in order for you to take a look at what's out there. So that one of the websites is clinicaltrials.gov and also clinicalresearch.com.aware. As of right now, there is a list of around 442,000 studies with locations all over the US and in about 221 countries as of March 2021. So ask your doctor if there are any clinical trials that might be right for you. And then also do your research or join a support or advocacy group in your community that might have patients that are like you that might be looking to join a clinical research trial, just so you can gauge with them and speak with them from someone that's from your point of view. Okay, that is all I have. So if anybody has any questions.
Thank you so much, Katie. That was great. Let me see if I see any questions. And I've also, in the chat, I've added, GAAPP has a matching tool with one of our partners as well. You can match yourself with an available clinical trial based on the particular area. So that I put that link in the chat. We also have a brief video on the GAAPP website that will describe the process a little bit more. Katy, I wonder, we've talked a little bit, the amount of clinical trials, it is vast, and there's a lot of options and opportunities. And I think, this gives people quite a starting point. So the tool that I just shared, there is a very brief survey that will take your information down. And it will help to identify your disease state, your symptoms, and it will help match appropriate to where you live, where the study is happening, and what the specific need is. So it will really help identify the best match for you. And it's incredibly quick to do, and it's a wonderful tool to be able to use. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so there's different tools out there that you can use. One of the main resources that you're going to have is your provider, whether it's your primary care physician or a specialist that you're currently seeing for your condition. So just ask questions, research before you come in. There are plenty of resources out there that can definitely help you gauge what you might be a potential patient for.
And I think what we've found a lot of times is the timeline is so significant. So a patient can enroll and maybe not be contacted right away, or participate and then have a significant period of time where they're not really hearing. And I would imagine that that's pretty standard in the process. Can you talk a little bit more about that and why sometimes there is that lapse in communication and why that can be confusing to patients?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, different studies have different requirements. So this is called the inclusion-exclusion criteria. Sometimes when you're in that pre-screen phase where either a provider or a research nurse is going through a patient's chart, they might see that you are a potential candidate, but you need certain lab values to be included in the research, or certain test assessments, right? That you need to take certain values for that. So we either have to wait until that meets the criteria, or, test out the waters pretty much to see when you reach that point where you can get enrolled into the trial and then start the investigational product.
Great. Great. I'm looking to see if we have any others. I'm going to double check the chat as well and see if anybody has anything else that they are curious about. We've discussed the process, we've discussed the timeline and the criteria, and provided some tools. And I think, it would be, I would be interested to see if anybody on our chat right now has actually participated in the past in a trial. If they want to choose, I'm going to do a quick poll, and please feel free to I'm just going to do a quick poll. Have you participated in a trial? Feel free to participate and provide your feedback. And we have a few folks that are still on the line. It looks like we have about 50% have and 50% haven't. So that's actually, I would say, really good. And then I am actually going to, we have our president, Tanya Winders, on the line, and I'm actually going to allow her to speak. Here we go. Tanya, you are now live and ready to chat.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. And thank you so much for that great presentation. Really appreciate it. So I had a question just in regard to Antidote and the tool that we have on our GAAPP website. Can you talk a little bit around the way that that tool really helps to narrow when patients are looking for a clinical trial for any specific disease state? How does that help to narrow the search? Katie, sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I thought that that was for Lindsay. Yeah, I mean, so different patients, like you mentioned, have different diseases, right? Different locations, obviously. So that really helps you hone in on what kind of research you can be a part of. So it takes 440,000 studies and narrows it down to maybe like 100. So I think it's a really important tool to use if you are interested in looking at trials that might be around your area. Some clinical trials are only available in certain countries or certain states. So it's a great tool to use once you're looking for something that is very, very specific to you.
And then a follow-up question, just in regard to, through the pandemic, we've seen a major shift to what I would call decentralized clinical trials, right? So trials that don't require you to be in a certain city at a certain brick and mortar site.
Right.
Are you seeing that more so as the long-term trend, and how is technology advancing clinical trials?
Yeah, I definitely think that it's something that the pandemic has helped in regards to clinical research. I specifically haven't seen, or rather worked with trials that you don't have to go to a specific site, but I have seen trials that offer more locations for patients. So for example, I'm a part of a trial right now for COPD that is national. So it's not in just one state. So I think that, kind of propelled it, clinical research to go in that direction where it can be more accessible to patients, not just because of the pandemic, of course, but also to include a lot of diversity when it comes to research.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Does anybody else, I think we're having some issues with the chat. So if anybody does have a question, please use the Q&A function. If you have any additional questions for Katy or for GAAPP, we'd be happy to answer it. If we don't have any questions, I'll give a few more minutes just to see if anything else comes through, if I see any hands raised. If not, we will conclude for our first session. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to send on through.
I see one hand raised, Moner Doke. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
Excellent. Thank you, Katy. Let me allow. Moner, did you have a question with your hand raised? Moner Doke, I think you had your hand raised. Did you have a question? Oh, perhaps that was just a mistake. Okay. I think it may be a mistake. Moner, if you have a question, if you want to put it into the Q&A, we couldn't seem to hear you, even off mute. If you had a question, if you want to use at the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A icon. If you click on that, you'll be able to type a question and I'll be able to have Katy answer it. Right. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Katy, for your time today. I think it was an incredibly valuable presentation for our attendees. We will have this, it's been recorded, so we will have the link on the GAAPP website and in our YouTube page. I'm excited to announce that we will be having our next GAAPP Academy this time next month on the 16th of March, focusing on volunteer management and using one of our partners, Chizuba, to discuss how global talent in coming up with virtual volunteering. So often our patient advocacy groups are utilizing patients and for their volunteers, and that can be very limiting in the amount of people time that you have. And there are great options for virtual volunteering that are emerging in the market, and we'll learn a little bit more about that. So please, you'll be receiving emails from GAAPP about the next GAAPP Academy. We will also be having one monthly through the summer on topics that are most important to you that help you run your organizations effectively. I want to thank you for your time today and for joining us. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact us at GAAPP. If you have any other questions for Katy, you can also send through GAAPP, and we'll make sure she gets it and she can reach out to you directly. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed presenting to you guys. I'm going to share my email really quickly, just in case you have any questions or if you just want to chat regarding clinical trials, and also my office number. So reach out if you have any questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Katy. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.